This is Analytics with Asa, and today I'm joined by a good friend of mine, Eric Rory. Eric, how you doing, man?
Good. How are you?
I'm great. I'm excited to talk some NFC West craziness, one of the weirdest divisions in football. But before we do that, I like talking about pop culture. Last episode, we talked a lot about pop culture, so I want to get an opinion from you. What is your hottest music take? And feel free to get as hot as you want.
I'll keep it a little light today. We've talked a little bit off the air. I've recently, went to my first ever concert, Tyler, the Creator. And so I say this, I think Igor is not his best. Honestly, it's my fourth favorite. I think Chromacopia obviously is great. My first concert, but if I'm being really real, the most enjoyable listen I've had is maybe Call Me If You Get Lost. I don't know why, it flowed so well. I love Tyler Baudelaire. He's my favorite character out of all of them. The album just kind of like, it's kind of a little bit of a shift before like you kind of get to Chromacopia, because initially with the last two albums before that, we had Flower Boy, which kind of like we start to explore that, softer side, the more vulnerable side. And then we also have Igor, which I still think is great, which is all about breakup and heartbreak. But I don't know, something about the raps and just kind of like the flows on Call Me If You Get Lost, and then kind of seeing that kind of transition to parts of Chromacopia, which I am very biased towards, obviously, but I just think that, Igor is it's good. But maybe I don't understand it because I haven't had that real heartbreak in life yet. But it's not his best, in my humble opinion.
Okay, that's a relatively hot take. Nothing too crazy, but no, I think that probably Igor is my personal favorite. Maybe just because of the like universality of it, just the fact that while not everyone can relate to personal breakups all the time, they can also relate to the fact that like sometimes you have these very strong feelings about someone and you can't necessarily express it. And I also just like the like weird creative approaches that he takes with that album. I think the art style is really interesting. But yeah, Tyler, the Creator, one of the best artists that we have in our generation. So very, very lucky to have seen him in concert for yourself. I have not personally seen him because I cannot afford it, but I definitely want to very, very soon.
Yeah. I'll say with Igor, last night I was watching a video about it, and the guy pretty laid it out pretty well. He said it's like a loop. The whole album is a loop because like where you end is like with "Are We Still Friends," and the theme you hear like "Are we still friends?" after you go on this whole journey of breakup, obsession, saying, "Oh, what can I do to make this person like me?" And then you kind of listen to Igor's theme again. It's like the whole cycle restarting. So like and that's what he said. Like the album doesn't like I think he's like the way the last song ends, it doesn't end on like the right note you would think most albums end. So it's almost like an incomplete journey, like a loop, like a cycle. So that gives me a little bit more love for Igor, but like not as much as like Call Me If You Get Lost. Like I swear every day I listen to What's Your Name, or honestly that, or what is the other one? I Thought You Wanted to Dance. That's a personal favorite. I will play the last. I mean, I think Sweet's good. I Thought You Wanted to Dance is honestly my personal favorite, just because when it flips at that halfway point and it's just do you think I'm not in love, that beat gets me every single time.
Yeah, I think he's one of the guys who's been good at integrating that sort of like R&B with the rap, and he's kind of picked up in Kanye's wake, I guess we could call it. But he's a really, really talented guy.
Yeah, I love Tyler, and unfortunately Kanye, has fallen from grace officially. He was holding on for a long time, but it's not so. It can't defend everything anymore. You just gotta let it go.
No, 100%. So we are here today to talk about the NFC West, and we can kind of get your thoughts in a bit, but I think this is one of the weirder divisions in football because a lot of their expectations were really high, especially for teams like the 49ers, and the Rams kind of had an up and down season, but expectations were pretty high towards the beginning of the season for them. So over the course of free agency, there were quite a few moves that each of the teams made. What were the favorite moves that might have come to your mind whenever you've looked at this division?
Yeah, well, I think the biggest one, obviously, being Sam Darnold to the Seahawks. I like the move. I mean, I think that honestly, especially looking at the quarterbacks in this draft, and you got to think about it as a Seahawks perspective. Like, yeah, trading away Geno was a big move, but honestly, if you told me like, hey, I could take a chance with the rookie quarterback, or I can get Sam Darnold, because the thing is, everybody kind of knows what Sam Darnold is. Given the right situation, he can be a top 15 quarterback in this league. And honestly, if you ask any other team that doesn't have one of those guys, hey, would you like a dependable top 15 starting NFL? They're going to say yes. So I think that's a really good move. I also, again, I love the Rams. They got Poona Ford. A couple of weeks ago, I was listening to the Kelsey's podcast, and he was talking about who the hardest guy to block was, and he said Poona Ford. And then I kind of like that made me kind of look back. I'm like, Poona Ford. Like, I remember hearing his name. I know he played in Seattle. I know he played for the Chiefs at one point. I kept hearing his name, and I'm just like, he's just been everywhere. And then you consistently kept hearing his name. Is a great run defender, hard to block. He's short on the shorter side. I can appreciate that. I'm a defensive lineman. I was a short D lineman. I appreciate the leverage wars. And I just think that was a really sneaky good move. And then also with the Cardinals, I think that going out and getting Josh Sweat, reuniting him with his former defensive coordinator, great move. I think that honestly, a building block of a defense, any great defense, is obviously that pass rush. I mean, so you can't go wrong getting a guy who's really, as we saw in the Super Bowl and throughout the playoffs last year, really came on and really, along with the rest of that Eagles defensive line, took over the game. So I feel like those were the three moves that I really loved.
Yeah, I think those are some great moves. And typically in free agency, there's all these big names that kind of come and go. But typically the best moves are the ones that you don't really hear about until the regular season gets started. And you're like, wait, they got this guy for this amount of money? I think that's what's going to happen with Poona Ford, because while he may be in like the typical household NFL fan in their lexicon, but he's someone who was a walking top 10 run defender. He's someone who is, like you said, on the shorter side, but he's so good at run defense. And that was really the big issue with the Rams defense, is that they weren't great at stopping the run. As our queen Brenda Song said, someone who knows a lot more ball than you would expect. But yeah, she talked about we need to stop the run. And that's what the Rams really took to heart. And so I think that was a great move. Another Rams move that was one of these splashier moves, but I think was also great, was signing Devontae Adams. He's someone who's a little bit on the older side for the receiver position, but he's still clearly got it. He had a pretty solid season whenever he was paired up with Aaron Rodgers again. And he's still a really efficient route runner. He may not have that same top speed that he once had, but he's one of those receivers that I think plays the position that is going to age really, really well, because he's so crisp as a route runner. His releases are always great. And he's just a really cerebral player. And they had to move on for Cooper Kupp because of salary cap reasons. But whenever you have someone that you can replace that is arguably better at the position, I think that's a great move for the Rams. And I would not be surprised to see them winning the division, potentially winning some playoff games, and potentially competing for a Super Bowl. So I think a lot of teams made some great moves, but the Rams particularly, I think, really dominated this free agency.
Yeah, definitely.
So we are going to transition a bit into our exercise that we did last time with the NFC North division, this time NFC West, obviously. And we're going to start with the worst teams in the division, at least by the record last season, and then kind of move our way up to the best. So let's first go over the San Francisco 49ers. So they had some really high expectations coming into last season, and things just did not really go too well. Yeah, the 49ers are a team that really just got kind of hurt by injuries pretty bad, and really, really talented roster, but a lot happened since then. So let's kind of share the screen here. All right. Now, this is what's happened with the 49ers. Now, as you can see, most of the guys that they had to release or that walked away in free agency are some really talented players that they ended up missing out on. Do you want to kind of give us a macro level overview of what's happened with the 49ers and maybe some moves you like or dislike that they've done this offseason?
Yeah, I think with the 49ers, it's just contracts finally caught up to them. I feel like it's kind of the nature of the NFL. You have the 49ers were a very, talented roster, but they were starting to get a little bit up there with age. We can see that a little bit of injury history with regression, especially with Christian McCaffrey being out most of the season. We know how his kind of injuries are kind of like really – we know how great he is when he's healthy, but obviously we also seen that he's missed a lot of time, and that's kind of the engine of that offense. McCaffrey is like the 49ers for all they love to do, running the ball is kind of like where they get started. And when you take a guy out like Christian McCaffrey, and then you have injuries with everywhere else on the offensive line, you're just losing people constantly. And also with the looming threat of, well, you got to pay Brock Purdy $40-50 million a year. Eventually, somebody's going to be a cap casualty, and it's going to come down to like, well, what are we going to do here? And I think that's kind of what happened. I think my favorite move, just for them, shout out to my the guy who made me realize my first day of practice at St. John's University in Collegeville, Minnesota, that I'm not cut out for this. Ben Barch, he got re-signed. I love that move just because I love watching him play. Again, I love the guy. Really funny guy. I think he taught me so much about just like life. And again, funniest dude ever. And if you didn't realize he was 6'5", you just wonder, that's the NFL player, like super humble guy. But yeah, I just think that with the 49ers, it was just a bit of like the cycle of the NFL finally catching up to them. It kind of happens to every team. This is kind of like the beginning of like, hey, we have to pay some guys. Also, people are getting older. So it's kind of like almost the worst storm for them this year.
Yeah, I think on paper, most of the moves that they've made look really bad just in terms of losing talent. But the thing that I can really respect about the 49ers that a lot of teams are not willing to do is the fact that they're actually self-aware. They realize to themselves, hey, our roster is not as good as it was. And our contract situation is kind of coming up to really harm us in the future. And so let's get rid of the guys that we know are not going to be part of our starting core. So that included some really talented players like Kyle Juszczyk, someone who was really part of that offense for, it felt like a decade at that point. You have Javon Hargrave, someone who is with the Vikings now, Leonard Floyd, Malik Collins, all of these guys are really talented players. They end up trading away Deebo Samuel, trading away Jordan Mason. So whenever you're making all these moves, on paper, it looks really, really bad in the sense of your team is objectively worse now than it was. But one thing I can respect is that you're maintaining that core that may be part of the next time the 49ers end up trying to compete. And like you said, they still have that looming threat of having to pay Brock Purdy, which you can argue whether or not that's a good or a bad decision. But you can say that at least it makes things stable for them. But the more important thing, I think, is just the fact that whenever you're self-aware, you understand, hey, this team is not in a competing spot right now, and you can actually move on from some players that may be fan favorites like Deebo Samuel. I can respect that a lot because that takes some guts. And I can also just understand that whenever you're John Lynch and you have job security, you can maintain that job security by being aware of how to make your roster better in the future, maybe if it's not going to be the best roster in the world right now.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in that. When it's time to sell, when it's time to sell, you got to sell. I would rather sell early than be late, because in the NFL, if you're late and it's past you, you're gonna need to go find another job. This is not like a league where you can have all the time to build forever. This is what have you done for me lately, not what you've done for me. What can you do for me later? So always good. It's never a great time to sell, but I would rather sell early than sell late.
No, I think you hit the nail on the head here. So let's transition to their depth chart. All right, so starting with their offense, they've really maintained most of their starting core with the offense. Brandon Ayuk, Ricky Pearsall, their rookie from last season. Juwan Jennings was the big breakout from last season. Trent Williams, the ageless wonder that is Trent Williams. The rest of their offensive line is relatively stable, even though they did lose Aaron Banks to the Packers. But you're maintaining George Kittle, Brock Purdy, Christian McCaffrey, Kyle Juszczyk. There's no really immediate needs that are jumping out right away. But are there anything that you think we can attack in the draft for the offense to maybe improve that, both short-term and long-term?
Yeah, definitely offensive line. You mentioned it. Trent Williams is an ageless wonder, but at the end of the day, he's 36 years old, and I, as great as he is, I don't want to keep wondering, hey, when is it going to be the day that he's going to regress? Like, I would rather address it now. Offensive line. I think maybe not immediately. Maybe a little bit later. We can think maybe receiver. I know they did sign a few guys, so I know that that's not an immediate need. Running back as well. Christian McCaffrey's had his injury concerns. Again, not something we need to address immediately, but it could be something you can look at. So I feel like offensively, their 49ers are in a great position. They have like a lot of good players, but definitely age is the age is starting to become a little bit of a question. So I feel like getting ahead of that and making sure you bring in guys now that, and maybe in like those premium positions that maybe are not going to like, be an all-pro year one, but they could be something, even better down the line. So I feel like that's kind of where their offense kind of is. They're in a good spot, but they're also in a spot where like, hey, like we gotta think a little bit towards the future.
No, I think you're right that there are some short-term guys like Trent Williams who are really, really good still, but you don't really want to procrastinate on arguably the most important offensive line position with the left tackle. And so, yeah, we could definitely end up attacking that in the draft. Let's transition to something maybe a little bit uglier, and that's going to be their defense. They still have Nick Bosa, one of the best edge rushers in the NFL, but after that, things get a little bit uglier. So you have Fred Warner, really good middle linebacker there, but after that, there's really not much going on. Are there really some major weaknesses or things that we can attack in the draft that you think could benefit the 49ers defense?
Well, when the 49ers were terrifying, what was the first thing you thought of? The defensive line. Their defensive line need help. Nick Bosa needs help. I really was kind of hoping that maybe they would go get Joey, but obviously he ended up going to the Bills. But I think edge rusher is a good place to start. I think if there's a good value, also a linebacker would be a good place to go. But I honestly think that you can get away with those two, like, maybe drafting a little late, but secondary wise, they need help. The secondary has got very bleak, especially with what they've lost in free agency. So I feel like addressing the secondary, it should be number one, followed by the defensive line. And then if there's a good value for a linebacker, sure. But I feel like mainly for the 49ers, fixing the defense and helping that defense get a little younger, get a little faster, and increasing the talent, especially and getting those some good young players on good young contracts, is exactly what they kind of need.
Yeah, and to just talk a little bit about the analytical approach to this whole draft conversation. While the 49ers do have the 11th overall pick, I think there's a chance they may benefit from trading down just because they have so many gaps they do need to fill. So getting more bites at the apple, I think, would be an advantageous move for them. Now, if someone really, really talented does fall, there's the potential of sticking and picking, but we'll kind of see what goes on. So let's load up a PFF mock draft simulator. 49ers are picking at the 11th overall, and then we're going to keep the settings all the same that we did last episode. So leaning more towards the public board, care relatively about positional value, draft a little more for needs, and then randomness will keep it relatively low. So let's get things started. All right, so I do not anticipate any trading up, so we can kind of just get things going. We'll see who falls to us at 11. All right, so we have some interesting guys. We have Tet McMillan is falling. He is PFF's third-ranked player. Tyler Warren, I don't think they need a tight end. Malachi Starks, Mike Green. So I will kick it over to you. Do you think we should be sticking and picking here, or should we look into some trades?
Honestly, I love I love Malachi Starks. I feel like safety, you did lose Tula Hafanga. You did lose him. Safeties are dimes a dozen. Like, it's kind of hard to find a great safety. You can get a good safety. So, but Malachi Starks is elite. I love Mike Green. I think rent free in my head is that play in the Senior Bowl rep against Josh Connolly. Just kind of flowing up draft boards. Will Johnson, again, he has some injury concerns, but again, as a Michigan fan, I love Will Johnson. I think seeing him at 11 there doesn't really surprise me, just because of how the board's kind of shaking out. We've kind of seen him fall a little bit. I think when healthy, he's maybe the best corner in the draft. So I think you really can't go wrong here. I feel like there's a lot of good value here at 11, but I could also see trading back just because of how many holes they do have. But depends on who is knocking down a door for a trade. That's really important.
So I think because you listed multiple players, I think we do have kind of an incentive to trade back here. And the reason I say that is because the chances that one of these players, I don't know if Malachi Starks is going to fall, but there's a chance that guys like Will Johnson or James Pierce or Donovan Izaraku or any of these really talented guys, because this draft is really flat. There's the top 3 guys that we have in Cam Ward, and then Travis Hunter, and then Abdul Carter. But after that, I think the draft board kind of flattens out a bit. So I think we can see what value we can get if we were to trade back from 11. So we'd be getting the 22nd, the 55, and then the 86. I think we could ask for more, but let's keep things relatively realistic and offer this trade. I think we're going to get some value here by doing this. Okay. And just like that, Malachi Starks is still on the board. So
and
I will leave it up to you.
Yeah, I feel even better taking him at 22. Yep. So I feel like Malachi Starks is just literally sitting right there, just waiting. I feel like that's the perfect pick for start this defensive overhaul.
Absolutely. And Brett Coleman described him like this. He's a guy who moves like a cat. And I think that's such a perfect way to put it, in the sense that there's no wasted movements whenever he's playing football, that he's so efficient at moving that it's just everything is smooth. And that's what you want from a safety, because he didn't blow you away in the combine. He's not someone that ran some lightning fast 40 time. But none of that matters if you're not actually playing on the field with a fast speed, because there's people that play track that aren't good at football. But if you're good at football, you're going to be good at efficiently moving. And I think Malachi Starks is a perfect example of that.
Yeah, I think he called him a cat. Like, you couldn't hear his footsteps. Like, perfect. Everything you want in a safety is Malachi Starks.
100%. So we are now at 43, and there are some interesting guys on the board still. We have Trey Amos. There is Maxwell Hairston. There's Siobhan Ravel. There's Braden Swinson. He's a really good power rusher from LSU. There's Jaden Higgins. He could fill in a receiver position. There's J2 Tumaloau. There's a lot of guys that I think are still available. Now, we could kind of beef up the secondary, as we kind of already have with Malachi Starks, but there's also the potential of the guys like the athletic freak Landon Jackson. There's also Prince Umanamelon. I will leave it up to you. Is there a guy who's really calling your name in this spot?
Here, I really do like Landon Jackson. I feel like getting somebody right now who can help opposite of Joey Bosa. And again, he's athletic freak, but he's not completely all the way there as a pass rusher. He's very good. So I feel like pairing him with Nick Bosa now, you're going to get a guy who I think maybe could in the draft might be gone by this point when it plays out, just how the draft board is going. And again, I feel like with edge, finding a great edge rusher is hard. They're very hard to find. So if you can get one this late who's very athletic and can do everything you want to do and can potential to grow into something. And look, again, you see that 6'7", 280, perfect measurables. I feel like you can't really miss out on that player.
Yeah, so I'm going to show you his relative athletic score really quick. Great follow, by the way, is Ken LaPlatte from Twitter. But yeah, relative athletic score is 9.88 out of 10. So among all defensive ends, he ranked 23rd since 1987. And that just speaks to how much of an athletic freak he is. 40-inch vertical, 10-foot broad jump. He runs a 4.69 40 time. And that's being 6'7" to, 64. So yeah, he's someone who has just elite traits, and his production was not all the way there yet. But I think the 49ers have proven they can develop pass rushers. And so, yeah, Landon Jackson, I think, could be a great pick for them. So switch back over to the mock draft. And Landon Jackson, you are going to be our edge number 2 behind Nick Bosa. Now, because of that trade back we did, we picked up an additional second-round pick. And there are still some guys on the board. We have Shamar Turner. There is Darian Porter, another really talented cornerback who is another athletic freak. There's Jared Ivey. There's Arante Ursere, another really talented tackle from Minnesota. And then Omar Norman Lott is one of the more productive defensive interior pass rushers that we've had the past few years. So is there anyone that would work for this spot?
I really like Ernsley out of Minnesota. I feel like we can't completely neglect the offense. Like, I feel like he's a great player that, again, you can play him at guard initially, but I feel like, again, maybe he can also play tackle. He can bump out there. He helps you out in multiple different spots. I feel like when it comes to offensive line, those are positions that, they take a little time to it's very rare to see an offensive lineman come in year one and dominate. But getting a guy who's very steady, very good player, great length on him too, I feel like getting him now, and that's going to help you. It's kind of almost future-proofing you for when eventually Trent Williams retires.
Yep, I think that's perfect. And just like college, it's not a good idea to procrastinate. And so you don't want to wait until Trent Williams actually retires to have to either spend huge money on some free agent for tackle or overdraft one because you desperately need one. And I think investing in one now means that you don't have to worry about that for now. And then in the future, you can let him develop. I think you put it perfectly there. Arante Ursaray is going to be our future tackle. Now, we are in the third round, and there are some guys who I think are great that could fit with this team. Chris Paul Jr., a really rangy linebacker from Ole Miss who was great in pass coverage. You have Marcus Mbao. Vernon Broughton is a guy that Tasia and I drafted in every single draft we had last week because of the fact that there's a huge discrepancy between his average draft position and his actual rank. You have Joshua Farmer, really talented run stopper from Florida State. Trey Harris, a good X receiver. Jared Wilson, a really good center. Yeah, there's quite a few guys that are still available here. Jalen Royals, another really talented wide receiver. I think he's Sam Monson's wide receiver 4 or 5. But yeah, really, I think we can go anywhere. But there's one guy that I want to pick, even if it's not the best move, and that's going to be Savion Williams. Savion Williams, to me, could be the future Deebo Samuel. He's someone who primarily played receiver, but he was lined up at running back a lot. And that was Deebo's big thing in the past, just because he's so athletic. And Savion Williams is a lot like that. So I don't know if you've done research on him, but do you have any thoughts on Savion Williams potentially being a 49er?
Freak of nature. Yep. That's all I have to say.
All right, Savion Williams, you will be our Deebo of the future. Now, we have another third-round pick, and there are some guys we can invest in here. Jalen Noel is still available. I think he honestly might go tail into the first round or early second. He's really, really talented. Yep. RJ Harvey, UCF, my alma mater. I guess, I don't know, is alma mater past or present? I still go to UCF. RJ Harvey kind of lit up the combine a lot. There are still some guys available. Is there anyone calling your name that could help out this 49ers team?
Honestly, I feel like we're almost in like prime running back territory where you want to get a guy because that who's dependable, can like play behind Christian McCaffrey, because ultimately that's your biggest investment. You want to keep Christian McCaffrey healthy. I really love RJ Harvey. Damian Martinez also there. It might be a little early for him, but I also love giving that, like, compliment. Jaden Blue is another guy, more receiving back. I was tailgating the Michigan-Texas game, and the amount of times they would just throw out to the flat, and Jaden Blue would come out there and just keep killing us over and over and over again, made me just want to cry. And then we have Byshawn Tootin, again, fast. That's all I have to say, fast. So running back, I think maybe we could hold off a little bit just because of the amount of names that are still there.
Yep.
But I think, honestly, we might want to keep it going. I think Vernon might be just the pick. I feel like interior defensive line it's always good to have more interior defensive linemen. Those big guys don't grow on trees.
Yeah, you're right. And it's very rare that those guys end up making it to free agency. And when they do, they're really expensive. So I think Vernon Broughton, really productive pass rusher. He was alongside Alfred Collins, so he may not have been as widely seen as some of these other pass rushers, but he was arguably a better pass rusher than Alfred Collins was. And he didn't really get the credit that he deserved, but really talented player, Vernon Broughton. We are continuing the trend of drafting you in every single draft. So we have another pick in the third round. There are some guys still available. I don't know if you want to go running back now, but I think we can invest in some offensive line. You have Tez Johnson, really, really small wide receiver, but arguably one of the most productive ones. You have Dorian Strong, a good cornerback. Is there anyone out here that looks interesting to you?
Honestly, I feel like, and just to briefly talk about him, Deion Walker. I'm curious what you think about him, honestly, because if you asked me if Deion Walker would be available in the third round last year, like this time last year, no way in the world. But again, he's 6'6", 340. But unfortunately, you scream into your run stopper, but he actually kind of plays more like an edge. He played a lot on the edge, and that's what I don't love about it. But he's so young and he's so talented, you can just see the potential there. I hate to go back-to-back D-line, but interesting player. I thought I'd shout him out. But I feel like maybe we can, again, hold off a little bit on running back because we do have Christian McCaffrey. So I think I would defer this pick to you on this one. I do love Jeffrey Bassa, too. I feel like he plays very rangy linebacker as well.
Yeah, it's with Deion Walker, it's if you are someone who just did not perform that well as an athlete in the combine, I don't think that's the biggest deal. And it varies a lot from position to position. But I think with Deion Walker, whenever you are an objectively poor athlete, at least by these like athletic testing metrics, that's probably not going to look so great. And I know the Niners like these athletic guys. And so getting Deion Walker, I think, would be an interesting gamble to take because he was relatively productive and he's still like a giant human being. He's like 6'6", 6'7", and weighs like over 300 pounds. And so that's an important thing to have as someone who can defend the run. But I do think there's some guys that are more productive at the pass rush. Like Aeneas Peoples is arguably the most productive interior pass rusher, 17.8% pass rush win rate, which I think is an important stat to have whenever you're an interior. Kobe Bryant is someone I like a lot as well. It may be a tad early, but I'm perfectly comfortable taking him here. He's very small. He's, 175 pounds, but he's very feisty. And he's someone that likes to trash talk a lot. He's someone that likes to hand fight. And he's someone that I think is the perfect guy to just slot in and fill that cornerback personality. And so I think of all the guys that are still available, Kobe Bryant might be my personal favorite. So if you're comfortable with that, I'm cool with going with Kobe Bryant, even if it is a tiny bit of a reach.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with it.
Cool. All right, Kobe Bryant, future cornerback for the Niners. All right, now there are some guys still available. We have Will Howard, could be a potential backup quarterback, but typically any pick past the second round for a quarterback is just lighting that pick on fire. So we can maybe avoid that. But there's some other guys. Jamari Caldwell is pretty good. We could get Kobe Bryant's teammate. Baron Sorrell's good. Jalen Rivers. I don't know. You feeling going offensive line, linebacker? What kind of is calling your name here in regards to the position we want to attack?
I feel like getting a linebacker. I feel like, not an immediate need because we have Fred Warner there, but, if we can get a guy, we can see. I want to see who's there. Barrett Carter, athletic linebacker, really good athletic linebacker. I do like Barrett Carter.
Yeah, Barrett Carter, that's perfectly fine with me. I think he's someone that could be waiting in the wings because as good as linebackers are, they don't always age that great. And Fred Warner is kind of getting up there in age, really, really talented, but it's difficult to be ranging and tackling running backs all the time whenever you're getting up into your 30s. And so, I think he'd be a perfect guy to be waiting in the wings. All right, next up, we have 138. Now, this to me, I think, is a perfect scenario for the Niners, and it's because Bashal Tutin is someone who is dominant in outside zone runs, and that's pretty much all the 49ers run. And so he's not just someone who's an athletic freak because obviously he had one of the best combines in terms of 40 time, but he's someone that is like not weak as well. And so he's not just one of those guys that catches the ball and the second he gets touched, he goes down. He's someone that can force missed tackles. He can beat guys to the edge. He's really, really fast, which is obviously his biggest strong suit. But I think he is the guy that is built in a lab to play for Kyle Shanahan. What are your thoughts on Bashal Tutin?
Again, obviously, first thing you think about when you think of that 40, again, outside zone is what the 49ers do the best. So I feel like he's a great complement to what they have with Christian McCaffrey. He can also, I think, is a guy that you can come in immediately and contribute. Definitely take some carries off of Christian McCaffrey. As we know, coming back from injury is tough, especially on running back. And so you want to keep it. If you really want to invest in Christian McCaffrey, you got to get him somebody who can spill some of those carries for him.
Yeah, the only real big concern with Tutin is just the fact that he has a really, really bad fumbling problem. I think he had 9 fumbles in the past season or two, and that's on a lot less carries than a guy like Ashton Genty, who had a similar number, but Ashton Genty's getting the ball like every single play. So he has at least an excuse there. But Bashal Tutin has a little bit of a fumbling problem. They may be able to fix that in the future, but I think he's the perfect fit for Kyle Shanahan's offense, who does not have to play right away, but could work a lot better whenever he's paired up with a guy like Christian McCaffrey. All right, we have 147, and at this point, things start to thin out a little bit. So we're really more so just drafting for depth or drafting for like lottery tickets. So if there's any guy that you just love as a sleeper, I'm perfectly fine with reaching on him. Kyle Williams is one of those names that's popping in my head. Is there anyone that's really calling your name at this spot?
Yeah, I was definitely thinking, honestly, Seth McLaughlin.
Mm-hmm.
I know he's coming off the injury, but again, really good center when he's healthy. Like, he had a little bit of snap problems, back in Alabama, but really picked it up this year before the injury. So I feel like getting him, that's again, he's a solid center prospect. Somebody that, could turn into something. But again, center's a pretty safe position to draft. So I feel like getting a center here would be good for the 49ers. Have somebody that, again, depth piece, something like that.
Yeah, let's do it. Seth McLaughlin, someone who had a little bit of injury, but once again, doesn't have to start right away. And I really hope Kyle Williams was taken 2 picks before that. He's someone who I think it was Chris Sims is really, really high on, like much higher than consensus, but really good contested catcher, 2.7 yards per route run. So he could be someone we target whenever we're role playing as these other teams, but really, really talented player. Kind of a bummer that he did not make it. At this point, I think we're really just shoring up some guys that we think may need some help. And we're also just throwing out a few lottery tickets. So one of those guys that I'm comfortable with drafting is Isaac Tesla. He's someone that was not the most productive wide receiver in Arkansas, but he was a freak athlete. He did not drop the ball pretty much ever, and his contested catch rate is crazy, like 71%. Now, it's not on the biggest sample size, but 6'4", 217, runs a great 40 time, is a really freak athlete, and someone that could play that kind of big slot role or the X receiver, depending on whatever you feel more comfortable with. I'm perfectly fine with Isaac Tesla as just a dart throw. Do you have any thoughts on Tesla?
Not much. I'm not going to sit here and be like, I'm the biggest Tesla fan. Not really. Watched a lot of tape, so I'm not going to sit here and be like, yep, that's a terrible, great pick. But works for you. That's great for you.
All right, 227. At this point, anyone that you want to throw out is comfortable with me.
Let's go Malachi Moore.
What is it, Malachi Moore?
Yeah, let's go. The first name I saw, I was like, oh, I remember watching him play. Kind of hard down here.
Yeah. Once you get past like round 5, 6, 7, things get a little bit rougher. But yeah, he's someone who's really productive in college. 89 coverage grade, 23% forced incompletion, and he's definitely stout in the run as well, which I think is important whenever you're playing safety, especially in that really versatile Robert Saleh defense that's going to happen soon. Malachi Moore, I think, could be a great pick here. All right, we have 2 more picks left. Let's see what we've picked so far, just in case there's any needs we really need to shore up. Safety, edge, tackle. I think we covered up most of our holes. Honestly, if we want to throw a flyer on some defensive linemen we like, that could be a thing. Mm-hmm. Another tackle we like. Let's see who is still out there.
I guarantee they're not going to go special teams again. So,
yeah. Johnny Walker Jr. from Mizzou, a pretty relatively productive pass rusher, 6'3", 255, so moderately solid size. Yeah, let's just throw out Johnny Walker Jr. Could shore up that edge position, could play special teams if he has to. All right, then final pick here. This is where things get really, really rough. Clay Webb from Jacksonville State. There's Kyron Lacey.
Jordan.
There's one more guy from Arkansas. I don't know if he'll be here or not.
Arian Smith's a great receiver, just has drop problems. Very fast.
Yeah, let's just throw one on Clay Webb, potentially shore up that offensive line. Definitely not someone we can expect to start right away, but I'm pretty satisfied with this draft. So I want to get your thoughts first before we reveal our grade. What do you think our grade is for this draft?
I'm going to go with a solid B, B minus.
B. Okay. Let's see what we got. I think we're going to be a little higher than that. A minus. I will gladly take that. As Tay Seth said, A minuses will get you through college. And, the Niners are not a college team, but they will have to make a lot of bold moves in order to improve their future. And they've already kind of moved on to taking steps to that. And I think this draft would be a great step in the right direction. All right. Next up, we have the Arizona Cardinals. So they're a team that really took, speaking of step in the right direction, they're a team that with the new coach that they had, they really got much better in the things that matter the most. And that was the defense and the run game. And so there's some moves that we can make to shore that up. But before we do, let's cover what they have done in free agency. If I can pull it up. There we go, Arizona Cardinals. So you've already talked about it a little bit. Josh Sweat was like their big acquisition, but they also got guys like Dalvin Tomlinson, a really good run defender, and then Akeem Davis-Gautier, also a pretty talented guy. So was there anything that we have not already talked about that kind of summarizes the way the Cardinals handled free agency in this whole offseason period?
Yeah, again, I think they're another one of those teams that are making good moves that are going to help you win games. Edge, pass rush, and stopping the run. And if you look at that's where they spent their money on this free agency. So I feel like going that route again, not the biggest snake, not the biggest free agency, but a solid free agency is always kind of what you need.
100%. So let's transition to their depth chart. And not really any crazy moves with their offense. Zay Jones is still one of their top receivers. Marvin Harrison, the draft prospect last season that had one thing I want to talk about a little bit with Marvin Harrison is that he had a really productive season. He just wasn't like the best receiver on the planet that some people were projecting him out to be. I think Marvin Harrison's going to be good. I don't know your thoughts, but I think he kind of gets a bad rap just because he wasn't quite as good as like the Brian Thomas Jr. or the Malik Neighbors that were his draft mates. But I like Marvin Harrison a lot. I expect him to do some great things next year.
Yeah, Marvin Harrison Jr. is a living nightmare. He's not, and the thing is, part of the reason I think he's so great, I feel like he's not the most flashiest guy. Like, he's going to go out there, he's going to run brilliant routes, he's going to do everything you need to do as a receiver, and he won't make a noise. That's it. He's just quiet. I feel like, yeah, he might not make a lot of splash plays, but I feel like he's going to be a good player for the next 15 years. And we're going to look up one day and be like, wow, he's still productive. He's still going to be doing what he's doing. I love Marvin Harrison Jr.
Yeah, and then their offensive line, definitely not a serious strength that they have. I think we can invest quite a bit in that in order to improve their chances of winning. But obviously their quarterback of the future is still set with Kyler Murray, Trey McBride, one of the best tight ends in the league right now. And then James Conner, man, he is someone that I thought would trail off like 3 years ago. And he's still been really, really good. Just recently got an extension, so good for him. But James Conner, a great aspect of that run game. And then they invested in Trey Benson last season, Amari DiMercato the season before that. So their running back room is still pretty solid. But their offense as a whole, I think, is not bad. Could definitely improve with offensive line, maybe with another receiver to complement Marvin Harrison. But do you have any final thoughts on the offense before we switch over to defense?
No, just interior offensive line definitely could use some help. Again, another receiver would be nice, but he's going to definitely a very solid group.
Yeah, there's like no immediate weakness aside from the thing you mentioned with the interior offensive line. But yeah, let's transition to defense a bit. So this is where most of their free agency acquisitions came from. So Dalvin Tomlinson was one of their big ones, and then Josh Sweat, another big one from Philly. So do you have any final thoughts on the defense or things that we could potentially attack in the draft in order to get this team a little better?
Yeah, I think one of the things maybe going after another edge rusher might be a good place for them. Again, secondary, just want to address some things. Maybe if the value is right, a linebacker. Again, this Cardinals are one of those teams where they're just a solid team that is like, they don't have, it's not like they don't have any talent. It's just the fact that they're in that weird phase of that rebuild where you kind of like, you're feeling like you're about to plateau, but you kind of like need that next step to kind of like really take it where you want to go. That's kind of where the Cardinals got right now. Like they're in that weird plateau.
No, I agree. And so if we're going to make these investments in the draft, that's probably going to have to be in players that could be those difference makers. And so let's get that fired up. Let me transition to the Cardinals. So they're picking at 16 overall and same settings as before. Let's enter the draft and get things started. So we will go all the way down at the 16 spot, and Malachi Starks is still there. You have Mike Green, who I like a lot at this spot. You have James Pierce Jr. There's Luther Burden, Donovan Izaraku. Really, it's an embarrassment of riches. Let's see. We could trade down 3 spots, still select one of these guys, and potentially pick up an additional like 3rd or 4th round pick.
I think that's a good move. I feel like there's enough there currently on the board where I can rest easy dropping down 3 spots.
Yeah. So I'm cooking up a trade right now. We'd be dropping 3 spots in the first round in order to go up about 25. Can I do math? Yes, 25 spots in the second round. That's perfectly fine with me. If we can get in another like 6th round pick. Yeah, I think this is relatively realistic, dropping 3 spots in order to get up 25 and then pick up an additional 4th, 5th round pick here. So let's see if this trade gets accepted. Bucks do accept it. So drop down 3 spots. We still have Malachi Starks available. We still have Mike Green. We still have James Pierce Jr. There's a lot of guys. It is really your pick. I feel comfortable going edge rusher here, so it's up to you as someone who played defensive line. Who is more scary if you were lined up against them, Mike Green or James Pierce Jr.?
I'm gonna go Mike Green. I feel like James Pierce Jr. I again this time last year was talking about number 1 overall pick, but I feel like again a little light. So, but again, great pass rusher. But Mike Green, he kind of gives me a little bit more. Like, yeah, you could say he played well. He played at Marshall. Well, it doesn't matter. I have one position to definitely translate to the NFL. It's the edge rushers. If you can get after the passer and also are good against the run, I'm pretty confident that you're going to be a good NFL player, and that's Mike Green. I think I trust Mike Green a little bit more in the run game, which is why I will lean him over James Pierce Jr.
Perfect. I completely agree with you. Mike Green, completely dominant Senior Bowl, even if it was just a few reps that he took. But I think he could shore up that defensive line a lot. So 47, there's still some really good players on the board. You have Trey Amos, Landon Jackson, someone we took last draft. There's Maxwell Hairston, the speed demon out of Kentucky. There's Siobhan Revelle. I like corner quite a bit here just because there's so many talented corners we could potentially pick, and that is one of their more immediate needs. So for you personally, do you feel going the safe route with Trey Amos or the more risky speed demon route with Maxwell Hairston or Siobhan Revelle?
I feel like if I'm the Cardinals, again, we're kind of looking for we're in that plateau. So I feel like, it's with corner, I feel like you can go a little bit on the riskier side here. Why not? Because the thing is, if you hit, then you have a player if we're getting at 47, who probably could have won that first round. So I do like Siobhan Revelle here, just a little bit more than Maxwell Harrison. But again, can't go wrong with either of them.
Yeah, I love that pick because a lot of people are scared of injuries, and obviously teams have much more information than we do about whether or not you should actually be concerned about a player's injury history. But Siobhan Revelle is one of those guys where if the medicals check out, he's easily a first-round talent, and his athletic gifts are part of the reason of that. He's also someone who has a little bit to learn at the cornerback position, but he has those athletic traits that a lot of people, including Trey Amos, do not. So I like betting on the upside. Siobhan Revelle, you are a future Arizona Cardinal. So just a few picks later, if you want, we could double dip with Trey Amos, but there's one guy that is really calling my name, and that is Jaden Higgins. Some people's top 5 wide receiver coming out of Iowa State, can play X, can play slot. He's 6'4", 215. He's really, really agile. I love Jaden Higgins here. Do you have any thoughts on Jaden Higgins?
Again, I remember watching him against Texas. That game, first of all, that game was wild, and just seeing him for the first time, really watching him, I was dazzled. I was like, wow, this guy can really run. He can pretty much do everything. And outside of him and Cam Scatterbo, they almost willed them to beat Texas. So I feel like Jaden Higgins is a good pick here. And I've also seen some people have him as wide receiver number 2. So it's not out of the realm of possibility. And it's shocked he's still here at 53.
Yep. That's perfect for them because, yeah, like you said, there's some people that have been projected as a first-round guy. And whenever you're getting him in midway through the second round, that's perfect value for the Cardinals. And that's, I think, the person that might be happiest with that, aside from Kyler Murray, is going to be Marvin Harrison, because all of a sudden he's not going to have double teams. He's not going to have teams that have to completely sell out just to stop him. Whenever you have a guy like Jaden Higgins, 6'4", good route runner, that could potentially be that compliment there. So next up, we have the 4th round pick, 115. There's still some good guys on here. Isaiah Bond, the speed demon out of Texas. Speaking of that game between Iowa State. There's Mello Dotson, a cornerback out of Kansas. We kind of already went the corner route, but there are some other guys as well. Defensive interior, there are still some talented guys like JJ. I don't even know how to pronounce it, but I think it's Pegues. He's like a big version of Travis Hunter, because not only did he play defensive tackle really, really well, but he was also a legitimately good fullback. And I don't think the Cardinals are one of those fullback heavy teams, but that's definitely an upside. Is there anyone that you would want to invest in right around the 115 spot?
Yeah, I feel like going JJ Pegs is a good pick. I also really like, even though he's undersized, Willie Lumpkin from North Carolina. Again, interior offensive line is always going to be something that, it's kind of, they're almost kind of like bust proof, good interior. You can find a good interior offensive line. So maybe we can wait a little bit on the interior offensive line. But again, getting a good defensive lineman those are hard to find. And as we can see with free agency, going out and buying a defensive lineman, interior defensive line, is only getting more expensive each year.
I'm perfectly okay with making a gentleman's agreement that we take JJ now, and then if Willie Lampkin is still there at the 121 spot, we take him, shore up both sides of the interior defense and offense. You cool with that?
I perfectly agree. So I'm hoping no one takes him. Looking at you, Indy.
All right, let's do it. JJ Pegues, come on down. Potential fullback of the future and potential defensive tackle. All right. Willie Lampkin is still there. For those who aren't aware, he's someone really, really small. He's 5'11", 290, which is just tiny for the any spot, even center. And so he's very, very small, but he plays with just such amazing leverage at that position. And one thing that Luke Braun said that I completely agree with is that whenever you have players that have built-in solutions to their problems, you shouldn't really worry about it that much. And so with Willie Lampkin, you see his size and you think, okay, he might just get bull rushed. But he's such a good run blocker. He's so good at moving in space that's not really the biggest concern. Now, he wasn't like the absolute best pass blocker in the world, but he played with such leverage that he could still easily hold his ground there. So Willie Lampkin, I think, is a perfect buy low guy, someone who does not have the exact physical archetype you're looking for at that position, but he's so productive. Why not take the flyer in the 4th round at this point? You're just taking flyers on guys. So Willie Lampkin, I think, is perfect. All right, next up, we have the 152 spot and then 225, and then I think we pretty much call it a day. So are there any guys here that look interesting to you?
Give maybe Trevor Etienne, good compliment to what James Conner is, good type of flyer running back if you want to, but they do have a good salary room, so you don't necessarily need to go there.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Simeon Barwell Jr. on Miami, again, interior defensive lineman. I know a little bit about him. Just good player. A little bit more of a pass rusher, more than a run stopper. So yeah, Jake Brimstool, solid tight end. So yeah, maybe Kobe King, a linebacker. But
I'm cool with Kobe King.
Yeah.
That's one of our big weaknesses, I think, is just the fact that you don't have someone you can really trust to play linebacker full time. Kobe King is someone who has his flaws. He's 6'1", which is not like massive for a linebacker, but he was really productive, especially against the run, which is important, especially with the fact that they invested so heavily in run defense this free agency. So clearly they value it a lot. Kobe King is cool with me if it's cool with you.
Yep.
All right, Kobe King is a future Cardinal. Now, last pick is 225. At this point, really just looking for sleepers, guys who have high ceilings or guys that could just fill up some sort of special teams role. So no serious guys we're looking at to potentially start, at least for now, but there are some guys that could still be there. Malachi Moore is still available, someone we picked last draft that seems pretty good. There's Jaquavius Marks. There's Will Shepherd. Honestly, at this point, I really like LaJohntay Wester. He was someone that played a great slot position for the what are they, the Buffaloes? Colorado?
The Buffs.
Yeah. So, 167, 5'11". He's a great mover. And despite being one of those smaller guys, he's really good against contested catches, which is important for being a really talented receiver. And so LaJohntay Wester, I think, is a perfect guy to just invest in. If it works out, that's great. If it doesn't, oh, well, it's a 7th round pick. All right. So what do you think we got draft grade wise for the Arizona Cardinals?
I'm going to pick up my optimism. Listen, I'm going to go B+,
B+. Mike Green gets an A+, Siobhan Ravel gets an A. We get an A. So I don't know if I've ever gotten an A+ draft grading. So I don't know if you can get higher than this, but I think this is perfect for what the Cardinals are trying to do. They're trying to invest in upside. And Mike Green gives you that. Siobhan Ravel gives you that. Jaden Higgins falling to the tail end of the 2nd round gives you that. And then Willie Lampkin, someone who doesn't really have that physical profile, but is someone who really, really productive in college. That's all you can ask for his 4th round pick.
Yeah.
All right, next up with the 2nd finishing place is the Seattle Seahawks. And they had one of the weirder free agencies of all the players, all the teams that we've looked at so far, because they almost traded out Geno Smith for Sam Darnold, and then they end up trading away DK Metcalf. So let's go over what they have done so far. The Seahawks. Yeah, their board is very full. So They get Sam Darnold, Cooper Kupp, DeMarcus Lawrence. They get quite a few guys. They lose and trade quite a few guys as well. Are there any notable acquisitions we haven't talked about yet that are important in discussing the Seahawks draft implications?
I think Marquez Valdes-Scantling, he's a good receiver. He's not going to obviously be your DK Metcalf full-time replacement, but again, another solid receiver. I'm kind of interested how they're going to end up using Cooper Kupp, just because I feel like a lot of his role is what Jackson Smith and Jigba could do. Now, I think Smith and Jigba could play also a little bit more on the outside, but they also did lose Tyler Lockett. They did release Tyler Lockett. So I feel like it's like a good balance for them. And I feel like, honestly, that with Marquez Valdes-Scantling, you kind of like give yourself a little bit of a Band-Aid. But at the same time, if there is a good receiver that does end up falling in the draft, I wouldn't rule that out either.
I don't know if you've seen this, but MVS has played with like the last 4 or 5 MVPs. And so I'm not saying Darnold's going to win MVP, but whenever he played for the Bills in 2024, Josh Allen won MVP. He played for the Chiefs, Mahomes won MVP. He played for the Packers 2 years, Aaron Rodgers wins MVP. So I'm not saying anything too crazy, but he's played with the last few MVPs. Sam Darnold could be a potential buy low guy for the MVP. This is not betting advice, just a little bit of a joke. But yeah, I think they had a really interesting offseason because I think they realized the state of their roster was not incredible. It was really second, maybe third in that division if you still think that the Niners are going to be a good team. But you get a guy who's cheaper than Geno Smith and is significantly younger than Geno Smith and Sam Darnold. Potentially, I think has a higher upside as well, just with the fact that he's younger. He has an amazing arm. And then you also get Cooper Kupp to pair up with Sam Darnold, someone who could fill that 11 personnel role, like you mentioned. But you also get guys that I think the league has slept on a little bit, like DeMarcus Lawrence, someone who does not have the highest like sack or pressure numbers, but did such a good job of filling in like the dirty work that allowed guys like Micah Parsons to be so successful. And then, like you mentioned, Marquez Valdes-Scantling, someone who drops the ball a lot, but is good at getting open and is a athletic freak. And so I really like what they've done just because, like we talked about with the 49ers, it takes self-awareness to be willing to like rip the roster down, and they were willing to do that. So let's talk a little bit about their depth chart and what we could improve in that regard. But yeah, Seahawks, I think, had just a really interesting free agency period, and definitely good to talk about it. All right, so a lot of their offense are new acquisitions. So obviously we have Cooper Kupp, we have MVS, Jackson Smith-Njigba was the first round pick 2 seasons ago. They're still kind of weak at offensive line, especially in the interior. But are there any guys that you really think we should look to improving upon for this offense?
Yeah, I feel like it's been forever, ever since after they won the Super Bowl and they traded away the center. I remember his last name was Britt. He traded him to the who'd they trade? They traded their center to the Saints. I'm blanking on his name, but ever since then, their offensive line has just been kind of bad. They've tried a lot of different players. They've tried to do a lot of different things, but I feel like they haven't really ever gotten figured out offensive line. And then again, another receiver would also be helpful, but maybe tight end. But I think maybe. But so I feel like there's definitely some gaps on offense that they could really like look to like kind of solidify if they get the opportunity.
Yeah, I think they don't have too many immediate needs. Like you did mention, their offensive interior is not really great, but they do potentially need an X receiver, just someone that can dominate on the line of scrimmage, who's maybe a bit of a bigger body than your JSN or your Cooper Kupp archetypes. But yeah, obviously their running backs are amazing with Zach Charbonnet, Kenneth Walker, 2 of like some of the best running backs in the league. Sam Darnold is going to be their quarterback of the future, but he is only on a 3-year deal, so it's not like they are fully committing to him. And I think only the first like year and a half or 2 years is guaranteed. So it's not like they're really strapped there. But let's move on a little bit to their defense, which is really, really young, really, really fast, but still has some holes in it. So are there any guys you think that need improving upon for the defense?
I think interior defensive line, again, you have Jaron Reed. I do love Jaron Reed. Byron Murphy is a guy they took last year. So I feel like maybe another guy, maybe else you can go in exterior too, and maybe another guy in there, maybe a little bit later. Corner, they do have we obviously know they have one corner. Getting another one to pair alongside him would be great. Maybe linebacker, but I feel like again they have a lot of solid places. At a lot of solid places. It's just kind of like again, taking that, again, they're kind of like the Cardinals. They're in a weird spot. They kind of like plateaued, and they've kind of just been Seattle's been Seattle the last couple of years, and now it's kind of like time for them to take that next step.
Yep. So let's try to take that next step with the Seahawks. So let me load this up. Seahawks are picking at the 18 spot, which is one of the best spots to pick in the draft just because that curve is so flat. So some really talented guys may fall to them. Now, let me make sure. All right, we have everything loaded up. Let's start this draft and get going. All right. So at the 18 spot, Malachi Starks is available, someone that we picked with the Niners, but could pick again. James Pierce Jr., speed rusher out of Tennessee. Donovan Izaraku. Kenneth Grant is one of those just mammoth of a person, a pretty okay pass rusher, but one of the best run defenders in the draft. Arguably the best nose tackle that you could pair with Byron Murphy if you feel so inclined. Not a ton of X receivers, at least at this spot right now. Emeka Ibuka is probably the best receiver on the board, but he's more of like that slot versatile guy you like to move around. Are there any guys that really are calling your name here?
I think that taking a flyer on Josh Simmons, the tackle at Ohio State. I know he's coming off an injury, but again, he's a great mover. I think he again, he's had a lot. He had some penalty problems, but I feel like investing in offensive line, investing Sam Darnold, as we could see, one of the things with Sam Darnold is if you hit him, you can really throw him off. So I feel like investing and protecting them is good. I honestly think that Mike McDonald had Kenneth Grant and Mason Graham when he was coaching at Michigan. So I think maybe a reunion there would also be nice. But I feel like, again, you could take as great as I feel like they have a solid interior defensive line. So maybe going offensive line with Josh Simmons might be a good move as well. But I can see edge rusher too with James Pierce. I feel like the last two drafts he's kind of been there, and we just kind of like looked and like, I like somebody else, but a little bit better. But I feel like maybe it might be James Pierce's time to shine finally.
All right, yeah. So it's really like a tie between James Pierce, Josh Simmons. I'm cool with going with the guy that's probably going to get the higher paycheck if he hits that second contract. That's going to be James Pierce. I know there's some character issues that some people are worried about, but really, really talented player. And typically the guys that are good year over year in college are ones that you can bet on. And he was, like you said, projected to be one of the top overall picks last season, just based on how good he was. And it's not like he took some serious step back or anything. It's just there were some other guys that took these giant leaps forward. And so, yeah, I think getting James Pierce Jr. would be a perfect spot for the Seahawks there. So we are up at 50 overall now with a few guys available. And I don't want to repeat everything, but Jaden Higgins is the perfect X receiver that could be that DK Metcalf replacement, despite him being arguably a better route runner than DK Metcalf. I don't know if you're cool with it, but I think Jaden Higgins could be
when I saw his name pop up, I was instantly thinking like, well, there's perfect. Like, honestly, if you would have tried to push from at 18, I wouldn't have pushed back that much. Like, I feel like just here I've been watching a little bit of Jaden Higgins, but I feel like the way you've been pushing him these last two drafts, I feel like, he's rising on me. He's growing on me. So I feel like Jaden Higgins right now fills a need and gives them that true X receiver that they lost with trading away DK.
Yep. All right, Jaden Higgins. And I think getting him at 50 overall is perfect. And guess what? 2 picks later, we can pick someone else. So they have really a need at interior. And let's see if there's any guys available there. Arante Ursaris, when we talked about taking in the first draft, I think he could be a guy we could take there. He's a lot longer than your average guard, but you could stick him at guard and things could work out there. Pretty good run defender or run blocker.
Josiah
Alfred Collins.
There. I'm surprised he's still there.
Yeah, honestly, I'm cool with taking Arante Ursaray if you are. Just someone that could shore up that offensive line. You don't have to make him play tackle for now because your tackles are okay. But you really shore up the guard spot if you end up slotting him there. Is there anyone else that you may be preferable over Arante Ursaray?
I don't think so. I feel like all the other positions are just kind of like solid. But again, I feel like investing in the offensive line, you can never have too many good offensive linemen. And honestly, at that point, if he's one of your best 5, just put him out there and find a spot for him. And that's all you kind of need.
All right. So we've really shored up most of the immediate needs we've had so far. We could definitely double dip at interior offensive line just because that is a severe weakness for the team. But you're getting a really good wide receiver. You're getting James Pierce Jr., who has one of the highest ceilings of the draft. And then you're getting Ronte Ursaray, really, really talented player there. So this may have also worked out perfectly for double dipping, and that's Jared Wilson, who might be the best pure center in the draft. Now, there's guys like Ray Zabel who may slot in at center in the future, but someone who actually ended up playing center for most of his career with the Bulldogs is Jared Wilson. Do you have any thoughts on Wilson?
Again, pure center. We know what he's kind of with Georgia's schedule that, he's cut from that SEC cloth. Definitely have to worry about him. Solid, consistent player. I like Jared Wilson right here. Double in my opinion.
Absolutely. So you're getting a much better interior line with Jared Wilson or Ronte Ursaray. You're getting an potential movable receiver, and then you get James Pierce Jr., one of the high ceiling guys. I really like the way this draft's going so far for the Seahawks. So at this point, there's some potential for trading back just to see if we can get some value. So I would be very mad if the Vikings do this personally, but we could get the 97 overall and maybe get the 187. Yeah, 97, you're dropping back 5 spots. You're getting up another 4th round pick. So I don't know if you're cool with this, but I think you're getting much more draft capital and you're getting just dropping back 5 spots as a result of that.
Yeah. I'm always a big proponent of dropping back to gain more, especially when where we're at in the draft.
Yeah, when you're filling up those needs at this point, it's really just, can you take flyers on guys that you think have high ceilings? And once you get to round 3, round 4, round 5, that ceiling does lower a little bit, but you're picking up an additional 4th round pick just for dropping back 5 spots. So that's cool with me. We could triple dip at the guard position if you really want. I don't know how realistic that would be, but Lathan Ransom is someone amazing against the run, 93.7, which was towards the top in the entire NCAA. He's pretty solid against the pass, but whenever a guy can defend the run like that, it just screams that he has a fire in him that is difficult to put out. So we don't have an immediate need at safety, but that could be more of a long-term play. You have Devin Neal. I don't think we really need a running back here, but David Walker, Sebastian Castro, Tez Johnson. There's a few guys available. I think of all these guys, Lathan Ransom is probably going to be my personal favorite. How do you feel about this?
Yeah, I think Lathan Ransom was definitely a player that had definitely got better as his time went on. As a Michigan fan, I got to see him, again, on Donovan Edwards, 75-yard touchdown run, the famous gets past Ransom. So he's definitely grown. He's definitely become more of a better and better player the more we sign him. So I feel like Ransom is a good pick here. Again, not really the biggest need, but again, a solid run defending safety, again, not the most flashiest thing, but it's very practical. Something that every defense needs. You need a safety that can come up and trust that, like, hey, if the things break, is he going to come down and save a touchdown? I think that's a really good play for Lathan Ransom.
Let's do it. Lathan Ransom will be a Seahawk. All right, so at 137, 139, we have quite a few picks left. So at this point, let's just take some dart throws. Will Howard could be a potential quarterback of the future. Barrett Carter, I like a lot at the linebacker spot. There's Brashard Smith, a good receiving back. Barrett Carter's cool with me.
Yeah, Barrett Carter.
All right, let's do it. All right, 2 picks later, we have some other guys we could take. Quinn Ewers. I don't know if you saw the throw that he had in his pro day that I don't know why the NFL posted it, but it did not look great.
The ball was fluttering. I was like, oh, my.
Yeah.
The quote tweet was like, why did they let him post this? Mitchell Evans is a Notre Dame tight end. Can you go wrong with a Notre Dame tight end?
And you know what? That's not an immediate need, but that's cool with me. Just take a flyer on a guy. And whenever you're coming from Notre Dame, you're a tight end. I think chances are pretty good. So that's cool with me. All right, we have 172, 175, 223, and 234 up next. Now, one guy that I like a lot, and it's someone that Trevor Sikkema talks a lot about with the NFL Stock Exchange podcast, is Kyle Monungai. He's someone who is one of those sleepers who just does all the dirty stuff perfectly well. So he is an amazing pass blocker, which is important for those younger running backs to get some playing time. Solid in special teams. He's someone who doesn't fumble the ball a lot, which is important whenever you're one of those power backs that gets hit a lot. and he's someone that was amazing whenever it actually came to putting a ball in at the goal line. So while we don't have some immediate need at running back, you really can never have too many running backs that you can trust. So if you're cool with it, Kyle Monunga, I think, would be a good pick to kind of fit that Seahawks tough culture.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, let's do it. Kyle Monunga out of Rutgers. Now, we have 3 more picks left. Tyler Cooper could be a guard that we could invest in. Not the highest ceiling in the world, 6'6", 310. So he's a big guy, but, not the most athletic guy in the world. But, it's important to just take flyers on people. So we could take him, Jonah Monahan. There's Emory Jones.
Yeah,
John Williams,
Denzel Burke. I can't believe I was blanking earlier when I forgot about Devon Witherspoon. Mm-hmm. But again, Denzel Burke he's a solid corner. A guy could, again, you can never have too many corners. Again, really good player. I think he was a little bit of the hype for him coming out of high school, kind of like compared to what he was as a player, was a little bit less, but again, solid player, especially where we are in the draft.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's do it. For a Michigan fan, you're comfortable with taking quite a few Ohio State guys.
I don't want to talk about it. It's only because all the Michigan guys are gone. I'll take late flyers on them.
All right, let's see. We've already invested a lot in safety. Jimmy Horn Jr. is still available. Will Shepard is still available. LeJontay Wester, a guy we talked about last draft, but he's a slot guy. We don't really need slot guys because we have 2 of them already, but just thought I'd point that out. There is Jamon Dumas Johnson. I'll be honest, I don't know many of these guys. So if anyone's just kind of calling your name, someone who has a cool name, I'm cool with taking that as well.
One guy that I really do like is I just saw his name out of Nebraska, the Ty Robinson. Big guy. I mean,
wait, let me scroll down.
Yeah, he's kind of far down here. There he is.
Gotcha. Yep.
Big guy. That's
big guys win games. So
yes,
I'm cool with this. All right, 234. This is really just take anyone territory.
Brady Cook.
I don't hate Brady Cook here. He's a pretty good athlete.
Yeah, and it's a 7th round pick. As we've seen, maybe he's nothing or he's the next Brock Purdy. You never know.
Let's do it. Brady Cook could be potential QB2, potential practice squad guy, but all that matters is that you're investing in that room, which is the most important room in the NFL. So what do you think our grade is? A little bit of a spoiler by seeing the first 3 picks, but I think we had a pretty good draft. Is there anything that you or any thoughts that you have on this draft?
I think it's a solid draft. I think we maximize the value a little bit with that late trade. I really hope the Vikings don't do that in real life, but but yeah, solid draft. I think we addressed a lot of BPA. Well, best player available at the end. So yeah, solid draft this weekend.
All right, B+. I will gladly take that. That's something that the Seahawks do need, is just some guys to fill out the minor holes that they do have in their roster, and they just need to get younger where it matters. And so I think they do that by drafting James Pierce Jr., Jaden Higgins, Arante Ursaray, Jared Wilson. All these guys are guys that could potentially start on day 1. And then at that point, you have just guys that you can take flyers on. So, yeah, this is a perfect draft, I think, for the Seahawks if things work out that way. So we have 1 left, and that is the Los Angeles Rams. So they really had one of the more up and down seasons, largely due to injury. But let's go over what they did throughout the course of free agency. Probably the most notable one is one that we've already talked about, and that is the fact that they end up cutting Cooper Kupp in order to get Devontae Adams. They also talked a little bit about Poona Ford. So aside from the guys that we've talked about, is there any name that's really calling you out in regards to some moves that they made that may be good, maybe bad, or just maybe worth noting for the future draft implications?
I love the re-signing of Ahkello Witherspoon. He was a solid corner. And I feel like as a team, like, you can never have enough just solid corners out there. So I feel like he's a good guy to bring back. Made a great play late in the season. So, solid player to bring back. I was a little surprised how fast they got rid of Jonah Jackson. But, I felt like, for the amount of money they spent the year last year to then not have him be that, yeah, I think he got benched at one point. So definitely a little shocking, but kind of the nature of the NFL. So yeah.
Yeah, what I find really interesting is that a lot of teams that have young quarterbacks will invest in like an older roster because they want that young quarterback to be able to just hit the ground running. In a way, the Rams almost did the opposite in the sense that they got a lot younger at most of these spots. With Puka Nacua a few seasons ago, Poona Ford's a younger guy, and they released / traded a lot of those guys that were getting up there in age, like Jonah Jackson, like Cooper Kupp. But what matters is that whenever you have these younger guys that the Rams have hit on, you're able to allow Stafford to just kind of pull them along because he's one of the best quarterbacks we've ever had. I know you're a Lions fan, so you've seen that firsthand, but allowing him to just lead this roster, I think is perfect for the Rams short term. So if he does retire, we can pick a quarterback in the future. And if he wants to play longer, you still have a pretty solid roster there.
Yeah.
All right. So let's talk about their depth chart as a whole. And really the most notable acquisition they made was picking Devontae Adams to be their wide receiver 2 behind Puka Nacua. Aside from that, nothing too crazy that they did. Rob Havenstein, another one of those kind of ageless wonder guys. But was there anyone that was notable in terms of positions we can improve for their offense?
Yeah, outside of maybe tackle, getting at the young tackles, Rob Havenstein's getting up there in age. I think, again, with them, they have a solid running back room with Blake Corum and why am I blanking on his name? Wow.
Is it Kyron Rivers?
Yeah, Kyron Williams. So, again, solid running back room. Receiver, maybe a number 3 receiver. Tutu Atwell is very good, but, you can never have another good enough receiver. So, again, solid team. I feel like this might be the draft. We might take a quarterback in the first 2 rounds because Stafford.
I was going to suggest it.
Yeah, and I think it's time.
Yeah. Yeah, and Stafford, he's not going to play forever. And there was speculation about him potentially retiring this offseason. So what's going to happen next offseason or the season after that, where you're either going to have to do the thing of investing in some bridge guy whenever you have a talented roster, or you're going to have to overdraft someone because the Rams, I don't think, are going to be picking high anytime soon because they're a good team. And so this may be the best chance you get to draft someone that the league may be lower on than expected. Hence Shedeur Sanders. But yeah, I think quarterback could be the route we could go in the first round. So defense, I think they're very, very young. Obviously, Jared Verse is a superstar despite being a rookie. He's a little bit older for a rookie, but still super talented. Poona Ford is the big acquisition they made to shore up that run defense. Braden Fisk was also really solid last season. Kobe Turner. They just have all these guys that you don't expect to be good when they're drafted, but are just incredible. And so they've done pretty much everything they can to make that team better. But despite all that, is there any needs you may see with their defensive spot?
Yeah, I think honestly with them, defensive line they've really done a great job drafting defensive linemen. And obviously they've done we might not be able to find another Aaron Donald, but we're going to find every piece of him and invest heavily in it. So I feel like defensive line is very good. Maybe linebacker and I kind of joke to myself every time you play the Rams, you just kind of have these random guys playing in your defensive backfield. They're young, they're talented, but you kind of maybe a little upgrade, maybe at one of the corner spots would be out there. Cam Kitchen, I do actually like Cameron Kitchen at safety, and I also love Quentin Lake. He was kind of plays a little bit of everywhere for them. So I think maybe that defensive back end and, addressing that back 7 and is really where they could do a lot of investment.
Yeah, I love the way you put it that they don't have Aaron Donald now, but they have almost like the individual components of Aaron Donald with each of their players. You have Poona Ford being a great run defender. You have Kobe Turner and Braden Fisk being good pass rushers. And so you don't necessarily have Aaron Donald, but you have guys that can fill in some of those roles that he was so good at. And while it's not under one player doing all of those things, you have guys that are really good at individual components that he was so good at. So I think that was very eloquently put by yourself. All right. So I have a plan for you, and we just started this mock draft up. I think we sim to about the 10 spot. If Shedeur's not gone by then, I'm cool with trading up if you are.
Yes. If Shedeur is still available at 10, I was trade up. And if he's not there, I think I have 2 guys that I would like to take a flyer on, but I think Shadur is plan A, and then when we talk about it, we can get to plan B if we get
All right,
there.
let's do it. So we are not going to have Unturbo this time just because we do not want our chance to get Shadur to slow down. So we're going to get things started. Oh, Shadur goes number 2 overall. So that plan is out the door. Cam Ward, Shadur. All right, we can definitely speed things up now. I am not anticipating trading up for Jackson Dart. Will Campbell goes, Mason Graham. One of the downsides of setting the initial speed at kind of slow is that it doesn't make things as fast whenever you actually set it to turbo. Mm-hmm. But I'm cool with watching the guys go off the board. Mike Green goes 16, Kenneth Grant 17.
Jahad Campbell.
Bucks getting Emeka Ibuka. That would be very weird.
That's a choice.
Definitely a choice. All right. So at 26, there are some guys that we have here. Kelvin Banks, I think, is one of the better pure tackles in the draft, 6'4", 320. So he's not like the longest arm guy, but he is 6'5", which is not tiny for a tackle. Walter Nolan could be another defensive interior guy. Gray Zabel, a guy who's projected to play guard/center in the NFL, but one of the best actual tackles in college. A lot of tackles, not the most like tackle heavy draft in the recent years that we've had, but I think whenever you need tackle, it's good to probably take them as soon as you can. But there's also a little bit of a need at cornerback, linebacker. Their tight end situation's okay, but is there anyone that really would be perfect for the Rams here?
I think going offensive lineman is it was always a safe bet. Rob Havenstein's not going to play forever. You bring in a guy like Kelvin Banks Jr., have him play guard initially, and then when Rob Havenstein retires, you slide him out to tackle if need be. Again, he's really young. He's only 21 years old, so he's going to get a lot better. So you always love high upside young offensive linemen, because offensive lineman is the hardest, in my opinion, the hardest position to play outside of quarterback. You have to deal with freaks of nature every 5 seconds, and having the ability to come in time and develop is what these offensive linemen need.
Yeah. So Kelvin Banks, I'm cool with that. Someone who could play guard, could play tackle, but what matters is that you're getting much better at that position. All right. We got to see if we can speed this up, because I don't know if we can do 61 picks of this. Okay, wait, it went even slower.
I'm curious. How would you in your head think about what if we just try to get into that second round, maybe draft, I don't know, a project quarterback in that second round? What's your thought process as the draft's decided to go slow anyway?
You know what? That's cool with me, because it really depends on who you're considering. So I have 2 guys that I think you're considering. I think there's Jalen Milroe, who is one of the best athletes we've seen in the position, probably since Anthony Richardson. And then probably the better actual quarterback, but someone whose ceiling is a little bit limited and has the same downsides that Shadur has with the pressure to sack ratio problems. And that's Jackson Dart. So is there someone that you like better between those 2, or is there some third name that I'm not mentioning that you may want to trade up for quarterback?
No, you hit the head when you said Jalen Milroe. I just feel like in today's NFL, having an athlete like that is always great. And then you're going to put him behind Stafford, who is, if anything, Stafford is maybe the best thrower of the football we've ever seen. Now, I'm not saying that he's not going to be able to teach Jalen Milroe how to do everything and make all those throws, but Jalen Milroe has everything athletically you want in a quarterback. He has the arm strength. He can make any throw. It's just that sometimes it's a little erratic. But the potential of what he could be is the ceiling's high. Jackson Dart, I'm a little bit weary of quarterbacks coming out of Ole Miss. I feel like the end's kind of I do like Jackson Dart, but I'm a little bit weary just because of the offense lane Kiffin runs. It's a lot of RPOs, which is kind of what the league's kind of trending towards, but the lack of athletic ability kind of scares me a little bit. If I'm going to take a flyer on a quarterback in the second round, I want rather an athlete who's a little bit better, maybe an athlete than he is a quarterback, but I can also make a case for Jackson Dart as well.
Yeah, you know what? I'm cool with taking Jalen Milroe. Let's probably go mid-second and then resume.
Yeah. Hopefully it speeds up.
Yeah, it speeds up a little bit. All right. I think around here. I believe Milroe is still available. Yeah, he definitely didn't go in the first round. All right, So Colts, let's see if they want to trade back. So obviously we'd have to give 90, 101. You know, let's give 90, 101, and then maybe a future second. 90, 101, or 90 and a future second for 45.
Yeah.
You know, it's an overpay, obviously, but whenever you're trading for a quarterback, I don't think that really matters because a quarterback being really good is the biggest upside you can ever have on a team. So let's see if they accept this. And then Milroe, it's going to be I just hit resume. My mistake. All right, wait. Now trading with the Seahawks. Give them 90, second overall or second round. Now let's get
137. Yeah.
Yeah, 137. Let's do that. All right, offer trade. They did not accept it. All right, let's see if we can get 175. Cool.
Yeah.
So at this spot, Jalen Milroe is still available. It's a little bit of a reach, but I'm cool with that because the quarterback is the most important position in football. And like you said, he is a complete freak athlete, someone who has a great deep ball, a great arm, is a really good runner of the football, can avoid sacks better than almost anyone else, and is really, really good at just being an athlete. But there's a lot more to the position. If there's anyone I trust to actually make that a better player, that's going to be Sean McVay. So, while it may be a little bit of a reach, Jalen Milroe, I'm perfectly fine with him being our potential quarterback of the future. So, things are moving a little bit faster now. We still have plenty of draft capital we can use in order to make this team better right now or make it better in the future. 101 is up next. So, we still have kind of a need at cornerback. Tackle is a little bit suited. Linebacker and tight end. So, Harold Fanning could be a guy we could invest in. Now, he didn't test amazingly, but was someone who was just super productive. 96 receiving grade, one of the highest in the entire class, 6'4", 230. So he's definitely a bigger guy. I don't know. How do you feel about Harold Fanning?
I feel like he's kind of a quintessential Rams pick. Again, you know, Puka Nacua didn't test well. Like he didn't light it up. Neither did Cooper Kupp really light it up either, but just productive football players. I feel like Sean McVay, sort of similar to how Dan Campbell is, Harold Fanning is a football player. Like he plays football. And so he overproductive. I thought he was going to test well, but at the same time, I feel like you can't go wrong with a productive tight end. Like I feel like tight ends again a safer kind of pick, and Tyler Higbee is your number one tight end. Bringing in the guy with Harold Fanning, who could potentially be a really good safety net for, Matthew Stafford. And then moving forward in the future, having Jalen Milroe, having a guy, Harold Fanning, who's a very reliable receiver long-term, is something that you could definitely have because tight end is really a quarterback's best friend.
Yep, I think you talked me into it. Harold Fanning, really productive and didn't test the best, but yeah, like you said, you're drafting football players, and Harold Fanning was great on the field. That's what matters a lot more than testing. Now, obviously, with tight end specifically, being an athlete is really important. But when you're that productive, I'm willing to look over the fact that you may not have had the most amazing 40 time or something like that. It could have been injury related. Who knows? But we are at 127, so the fourth round. At this point, there are some guys we could take flyers on. Like we talked about before, Willie Lampkin could work. Bashal Tutin could be a running back of the future. Jack Kaiser, the most linebacker name I might have ever seen. Is there anyone here that's calling your name?
Yeah, I feel like the last couple of drafts, we keep looking at Jack Kaiser. And I'm just like, we keep scrolling, and I'm like, again, he's a Notre Dame linebacker. Again, there's certain guarantees in life, and I just feel like he's on a little bit of an older prospect, so I feel like that's a safe pick. Mm-hmm. Not like amazing against the pass, but really good against the run. But Jack Kaiser is safe. Good. He's a good football player.
Yeah, I'm cool with taking that. Yeah, and it matters whenever you have a good name. I think that means a lot. And Jack Kaiser has a great linebacker name. So next up, we have 172, 190, 195, 201, and 202. So could be potential trade back territory, but I think our draft capital is good enough to where we don't have to do that now. At this point, it's really just backup quarterback / running back territory. And Kyle Monangai is a guy we've already talked about, but he could be a potential guy to pair with Kyron Williams. I know they did already invest in Blake Corum, but Kyle Monangai is like a different archetype, that more like bruiser / pass blocking running back. Logan Brown is a potential tackle. There's Danny Stutzman. Tonka Hemingway is also a really good defensive interior guy. It's not like we really have an immediate need there, but you draft good players. Jalen Lane is really good. Caleb Ransaw was also a really productive safety. Is there anyone here that looks like a guy to invest in?
I really do think that Kyle Monangai pick, he's a little bit like, again, Blake Corum and I'm going to blank on this. Kyron Williams are kind of like similar backs. Like they're both around that short, stocky, very quick. And Kyle Monangai offers something completely different to that, a little bit bigger than them. So I feel like it's a safe bet going with him at running back. Why not make his strength even stronger? Like sometimes that's all you need. And we know Stafford really likes having a run game, and Jalen Milroe is going to need a run game. So why not have 3 guys going there? And then he also obviously special teams value as well.
Cool. Kyle Monangai is a future Ram. So next up, 195 or 190 and then 195. All right. A lot of quarterbacks have fallen. There's Jalen Lane, the wide receiver out of Virginia Tech. I like him a lot, 5'10", 186. So he's not the biggest guy in the world, but a really smooth route runner. It's not like we have some immediate need at wide receiver, but that's important to consider. Tim Smith, a good defensive interior guy. Dylan Fairchild, the guard out of Georgia. Jordan James, we already kind of invested in running back. Dante Thornton Jr. is really, really good. 6'5", 214. I think he ran like a 4.4 40 time. So he's a really big guy who might be like your wide receiver 4 or 5. I'm cool with taking a flyer on him because at the end of the day, what pick are we in? We're the 6th round. This is really just get guys who you trust.
And again, I will 6'5", 214, 4.4, 6th round. Sounds good enough to me.
Exactly. So Dante Thornton is going to be our receiver here. Now, we have 3 more picks left. 195 is our next pick. Dylan Fairchild. You know what? I'm cool with him. Shores up your offensive line quite a bit, and he's someone who you always need guards. You always need swing guys. He could potentially be that guy. So Dylan Fairchild, 6'5", which is pretty tall for a guard, and he's a good pass blocker. So that's cool with me if it's cool with you.
Yeah. Definitely not the biggest athlete of all time, but we don't necessarily need a guard to do.
All right, last 2 picks are back-to-back. We have 201 and then 202. There's Ollie Gordon, Cameron Jackson, the other really big defensive tackle from Florida. 340-pound Jake Majors is one of those really reliable Texas guys who he called the protections for years at that point. Really good pass blocker. Jay Higgins, another linebacker. We may have a need there, so that's cool with me. I don't know if there's anyone here that's really calling your name, but any of these guys are fine.
I really like Jay Higgins. Very productive linebacker. Not the greatest athlete of all time, but sometimes you just need guys that are just always consistently doing the right thing in that linebacker spot.
Yeah. And he's good against the pass, which is important. It's a passing league after all, so Jay Higgins, perfect for me. All right, last pick. There's Achille Arnold. There is Cameron Jackson, Jake Majors. I'm going to take Jake Majors here. Good pass blocker and a really smart player. Not the best athlete in the world, so he's not going to be great at like running out and doing these zone blocks, but he can play really well against the pass, and that's going to be a lot more valuable than just being a run guy. So Jake Majors is going to be our potential center of the future. Now, what grade do you think we got for the Rams?
I feel like the Rams are one of those teams that always have weird draft grades. I feel like, again, B plus, B, we're not B plus, B range. I dare say A minus, but
I'm scared to look at the Jalen Milroe grade, but let's just do it. We get an F for Jalen Milroe. Now, I understand that on paper, there's a big discrepancy between where we picked him and where he is on the consensus board. But like we talked about, the ceiling on a quarterback selection is so much higher than any other selection that to me, even if the pick is not going to be highly graded now, I think that could end up paying dividends in the future. So B minus, I think the Jalen Milroe pick kind of skews that a bit, but I think that we had a good draft. We addressed some future needs. We addressed some current needs. I think this is a very Ramsian draft, and Jalen Milroe could be the potential quarterback of the future.
And also, one of the things I just really want to quickly touch on with Jake Majors not being the biggest athlete, you can hide a center. Like at center, you don't have to have – center is the one position in the offensive line you can really hide. So you don't need the greatest athlete of all time. Sometimes having a guy that's just solid – in there, and this is just a quintessential Rams draft. Like, if the Rams did this, you could probably bet that all these guys would, you'd hear them make some plays, and you see them out there like, oh, I forgot they drafted Jack Kaiser in the 4th round, and he's a consistent player that kind of fits what they want to do.
Yeah. So given all that we've done so far, addressing the needs of these 4 teams, is there any lasting takeaways that you may have about roster building, about draft, or just about the way that football is played currently?
Again, me playing a former defensive lineman, offensive lineman, I'm always going to say you win football games in the trenches. Like, that's where the game's always going to be decided. And I feel like that's kind of what we did today. We focused a lot on building on the interior offensive lines for all of these teams. They all kind of have holes. And I feel like there's also a little bit of, right now, a lot of these teams are like kind of in with the 49ers, they're kind of in sell mode. But the Rams had up and down year. But when it comes to like the Cardinals and the Seahawks, they're kind of like waiting to take that next step. Like, you could argue, I guess, a little bit. There was a little bit to clear out the Seahawks, but at the same time, I feel like what they did to clear out the roster, they still retain a lot of good pieces. So I feel like, honestly, don't be afraid to like take a swing sometimes. I feel like that's a big thing. You always want to improve the bread and butter, what makes you great as a team. But also, if there's a guy there that, has that potential to kind of like, change your whole entire franchise, why not take a swing on him? If he's a bust, okay, I'll live with that. But what if he's great? Like, that's the thing. Like, I wouldn't let, don't get so focused on like, oh, well, what he's not. Focus on what he is. What can he do? Like, especially with the Jalen Milroe pick, what if he just turns out to be great? What if? And look, that F grade is not going to matter in 10 years if he's great. But if he turns out to be a bust, oh well, it was a 2nd round pick, but I can live with that.
Yep. I think you put it perfectly that when you're swinging for upside, there's going to be picks that don't work out, but the ones that do could be so influential that it doesn't make any of that matter. For example, like a lot of people might have seen the Patrick Mahomes trade up and thought to themselves, okay, that's obviously a reach. He's not supposed to be going this high. And Patrick Mahomes is arguably the best quarterback we've ever seen. So, of course, that's going to be the exception to this rule. But it just speaks to the fact that when you trade up, you are betting on upside. And whenever you're betting on upside, it may not always work out. But when it does, it could be so influential, so impactful that it makes none of that matter. So I think you put it perfectly that teams need to bet on upside. And one of the most important things that I've talked about a lot is that teams need to be self-aware. And I think the 49ers are being self-aware right now. I think that's how they should handle the draft as well, is address guys that could be potential building blocks of that future team. And hopefully they do that. But exercises like this are what make the offseason and football in general so fun. So thank you so much for coming on, Eric. Where can the listeners find your work?
You can find me on LinkedIn, Eric Rory. I did a big data bowl presentation this year, and I actually focused on threat detection, talking about how as a defense can we dictate the slide or which way the center moves? Can we dictate that and dial up some pressure? So feel free to check that out.
Awesome. Well, this is Analytics with Asa, and thank you for listening.